With the full release of Outriders coming on April 1st, I was excited for a new game to grind and experiment with. With that said, I'm happy to bring to you all my experience with the final expedition, Eye of the Storm. This is the peak of the endgame in which I have completed and wanted to share some tips and tricks I have found in order to help anyone tackle Yagek within the Eye of the Storm. If you want a more detailed breakdown into what builds I would want with a perfect rolls and all the different talents and mods that I'd actually want to have, let me know, but for now I'll just keep it pretty brief and just show what I've been using here and what I use to complete this run. To begin, you're going to need to know what you'll be dealing with in there. For this expedition, you actually start at the final area. However, there are 3 obelisks in which you charge in order to break the barrier protecting the boss. Each of these 3 obelisks have different enemies tied to them, as well as ways to make charging them much easier. To preface this, the obelisks will be numbered clockwise around the room, with 1 being the closest obelisk to where you spawn. For the first obelisk, you'll be dealing with standard ad waves that contain Strix, in which you'll want to keep one of them alive, with the boss wave being 1 broodmother. For the second obelisk, you'll have the same standard ad waves with Strix, in which you'll want to keep one alive also, but with 2 crawlers as the boss wave rather than the broodmother. For the third obelisk, you'll have standard ad waves without Strix, so you must clear the waves continuously, with 1 mossback behemoth spawning as the boss wave. For the first obelisk, as with all the obelisks, you'll have endless ad waves spawning in as you charge it. However, we can get around this mechanic by actually leaving a single enemy alive, in which the game thinks it does not need to spawn in another full wave. We can use this to our advantage by leaving one of the Strix alive. A Strix is a ranged enemy that we can afford to leave alive, as it stays out of the range, while we can freely charge the obelisk. Once you have set up this last ad, you must be mindful of the boss wave, for this obelisk, which is 1 broodmother. You should easily be able to burn her down as she approaches and not impede your charging time at all. Once you've killed the broodmother, you can freely charge the obelisk while freezing the 1 Strix until it completes. Moving on to the second obelisk, with this obelisk you will take the same approach, as the same type of ad waves spawn along with the Strix you can keep alive. This obelisk's boss, however, is slightly different, spawning in 2 crawlers instead. I recommend taking the fight to them as they spawn to make it easier, as you can deal with 1 at a time, and not have to worry about dodging any of their attacks. Once you have charged the second obelisk, you can move on to the third and final one. This one will not be as easy, as you do not get any Strix to spawn during these ad waves. However, with a good build, you can easily dispatch the waves without any issue. The boss wave on this obelisk is different as well, spawning in the easiest to handle with a mossback behemoth. Just go ahead and burn him down as he approaches, and you should have no issues at all. Now, with all 3 obelisks charged, it is time to face the final boss, Yagek. Again, for the 3rd time. For this fight, it actually isn't Yagek this time that causes the problems at all, but the Reaver ads he spawns in later, once he has received enough damage. As a need to know on the moveset of this boss, he has a handful of different attacks, all in which are not very difficult to avoid. He has a line attack called Overcharge that you can dodge just from running to a side, a ground slam in which he slams at his feet if you get too close, an AoE that pulls you to the center and deals damage to you, and lastly, he has the Anomaly Rifts that spawn 2 orbs. The only attack out of all of those you really need to worry about is the Anomaly Rifts, as they do massive damage if not dealt with and can overwhelm you as he continues to spawn them in. Luckily, there is a super easy way to deal with these. You can of course use Blighted Rounds, and when the Blighted Rounds are on cooldown, you can use this tier 3 talent here, called Scrap Grenade. This talent allows you to one-shot them, in which you can see on my pistol I used to deal with them as soon as they spawn. Once you have the boss moveset handled, you need to focus on the real threat, the Reavers. These ads spawn when Yagek says his voice line. These enemies will spawn in 3 times in total. These Reavers have the same moveset as when you first fought Yagek back in the story. They will teleport to you and knock you down, promptly swinging their melee weapons, dealing massive damage. This guy can and will chain stun you if you do not deal with him immediately. So you're going to want to go ahead and throw out your cryo turret and use Cold Snap when they get close. If that doesn't work, and all else fails, you can always melee them, hoping to freeze them. Just make sure to focus these enemies first, and you should not have any issues. With all that covered, you will just rinse and repeat until you have successfully taken down Yagek for good. As always, thank you for watching, and stay tuned as I plan on experimenting further with different builds and setups for completing this even faster. I just wanted to get this video out there to help as more and more players reach this expedition.